thank you for coming out this morning and to share the memory of Veterans Day, initially Armistice Day, and to thank all of you who have served, that on behalf of a grateful nation. Thank you. My dad served in the Second World War, and well, I still have some of the few mementos that he left: his uniform and his rank, and a citation, well, Purple Heart, and a citation for I think the word is gallantry under fire, however that's phrased. So let's begin. And I also want to, because I'll run right by this, by mistake to. Are you leaving already? I'm not going to sit in your lap. It isn't that kind of a presentation. All right? This isn't counseling, or if you will, intimate counseling. Okay. And to wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving. And we know, don't we, that I just want to mention this, that briefly, that if you have turkey next week, a week from today, right? Am I right? A week from today. And if you have turkey on your table, you're not authentic. All right? That is completely inauthentic. To be authentic, how about this? How about seal meat? To be authentic, bear paw stew. And I have a recipe for that. I found that, I do. And not that I've served it, but they do have in a colonial cookbook, I found a recipe for it. And the first item right up front, the first reminder, as one prepares it, is to pull the nails. So I'll leave it at that. So to be authentic, bear paw stew, seal meat, raccoon, beaver, squirrel, rabbit, turkey, it's not authentic. And I saw a few out here on the way over, and I rolled the window down and I told them, run for cover. You've only got a week, and then you're fine after a week. Sir?
Was that the roadkill restaurant you at that venue?
In the where?
The roadkill restaurant?
Oh, I don't know. I know, yeah. I don't break for roadkill anymore. But I used to. So today we're talking about the memory of Veterans Day and initially Armistice Day. So what I'd like to do this morning is to roll out a number of parts of our story. And as we talk about parts of our story, it'll help to create, I think anyway, as I've thought about it, a holistic story, about Veterans Day, about the end of the Great War of 1914, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, the first national cemetery, which was Gettysburg, a word about that, a little bit about the Arlington National Cemetery. And do we have our bugler today?
Yes, we do.
Yes, over here.
Right over there.
Okay, terrific. All right, so you're on hold for now. Hi. I saw you sneak in. All right. All teachers have eyes in the side of their head and behind their head. That they have to. That way you avoid all flying objects, anything airborne coming at you. The Armistice Day, Veterans Day was initially known to us as Armistice Day, and it was Woodrow Wilson, who proclaimed Armistice Day, and that was in 1919, in November of 1919, as he remembered and he recalled, for all Americans, that it was on the 11th month, November, the 11th month, the 11th day, at the 11th hour. It was all quiet on the Western Front, wasn't it? And we know that that's the title of a remarkable novel, a small novel, with a big voice, with a great voice, and that's Eric Remarque's remembering of World War I, all quiet on the Western Front. And I know that all of you have read it. You either read it in the 9th grade or you read it somewhere, but we've all read it. And while it's from the German point of view, it's the British experience, the French experience, the Italian experience, the American experience as well. It's a generic book, and it is all quiet on the Western Front, 11/11, at 11 a.m. The guns fell silent. And that great war, that great war that had spun so out of control, that everyone believed, and correctly so initially anyway, that the war would be over by the first, by the time the leaves fell in the fall of 1914. Well, it was November. They had the right They had the right time of year. They simply had the wrong year. And in 1920, 1921, the first tomb of the unknown soldier was returned to the United States. And so many of these doughboys, tens of thousands of these doughboys, who gave their life so this may be, as Wilson remembered or asked for, the war to end all wars. Remember that? The war to end all wars. And what a noble purpose. And when Wilson drew the first draft capsule as a capsule, and he asked these young men, these doughboys, to go off and to have the great adventure, as it was called, they did not flinch. They did not back away. They did their duty as their president asked them to do their duty, as the nation asked them to do their duty. And they did so under Black Jack Pershing. And they did so, I think the best way to remember this is a life or an experience of purpose and excellence, to make the world safe for democracy, the war to end all wars. And when the concept of the Tomb of the Unknown was first presented, and that would be at Arlington, of course, that the Arlington National Cemetery, that there were so many unknown soldiers from the Great War. And while soldiers wore dog tags, and they did during during World War I, the cannonading, the artillery, the gas, the mud, that's many soldiers were separated from their dog tags, and there were thousands who were unknown, buried without name. And 4 of these caskets were chosen, and an officer in France was given a bouquet of white roses. And he stood in front of 4 caskets, and he was asked to pick one, that would be returned to Arlington. And he picked the 3rd from his left, my left, your right, 1, 2, 3, and the remaining 3 were interred in France. And the Tomb of the Unknown, that man came home. And that tomb was dedicated by Harding. Harding followed Wilson to the presidency, and to be chosen, as a guard, one of the guardians of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is quite an honor. And what I brought with me, and we'll take a look at where'd you go? We'll take a look at it later on. Maybe a 10 or 15 minute clip, of a burial. We will take a look at it, because it's quite moving, a burial, at Arlington, and as importantly, the way these men and women, it's a man in this case, and the way they're prepped, to be able to walk and take those 21 steps. And it's 21. And when one goes to the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown, or just the procession itself, that it's cathedral-esque, isn't it? It's quiet. No one talks, no one whispers, no one giggles. You're in the presence. You are in the presence of a great experience, aren't you? And here's a man who lived a life of purpose and excellence, and you're sharing it with him, vicariously. And at the changing of the guard, that it's always, as we cover our heart with, as we should, with the in Star Spangled Banner, and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and those types of disrespect annoy me, when that does not happen. Something as simple as removing your cap, when the national anthem is played. That's me being John Adams, out there in Norton. That's me being cranky, but I think it's reasonable. And those 21 steps, and the reason it's 21 and not 20, 21 and not 22, is that when one adds up the numerals, 1776, it's 21. And that's where we have the 21 gun salute, and we have the 21 steps. And the person walking that beat, if you will, or walking that vigilance is a better word, that they do not wear rank, so that there's no disrespect that I happen to outrank the person who might be in the Tomb of the Unknown. So you do not carry rank, and it's 21 steps, and you'll see it here, very carefully rehearsed, very carefully practiced, And only about 20% of the men and women who wish to serve in that, in that capacity are chosen. They're weeded out very carefully. It's like flight school. You're weeded out. There's a certain skill, a certain posture, a certain cadence to your walk, and one does not swagger hips at all. That you walk straight, and it is toe to heel, toe to heel, toe to heel, and you'll see it. And the reason we have Arlington National Cemetery as the second national cemetery is I want to briefly, go to Lincoln and Gettysburg. And Gettysburg, the first national cemetery. Today we have certainly over 100. And a beautiful, and Cape Cod, it's beautiful, that cemetery. And one time I had the pleasure to volunteer to be able to place flags, at each of the headstones at that cemetery. And it's moving to do that. I mean, to do something like that and to remember, to have an activity like that and to recall why you're doing it. That's no time for laughter or silliness, is it? I mean, it's a humbling and patriotic experience. When Lincoln went to Gettysburg to dedicate the first national cemetery in November of 1863, by the way, it's Lincoln who will also designate the last Thursday in November as Thanksgiving. I mean, that's Lincoln. Now, he had the date wrong. He had the month wrong. By that I mean it was in September, the first Thanksgiving. We know that. And he also had the holiday incorrect. That what the Pilgrims celebrated was a harvest festival. That's what they celebrated. They celebrated Thanksgiving, but that was about fasting. That was thanking the Lord for rain, or that a smallpox epidemic had passed, or they'd been able to repel, an Indian raid, or whatever it might be. When Lincoln went to Gettysburg, it was hoped by those who were planning the ceremony, and I'll be brief here, but we can always have questions later on. It was hoped by those planning the dedication to the cemetery, that Lincoln would not be able to attend. And those who put the ceremony together, knew that we need to invite some high-ranking federal official. They did not want to invite Lincoln. Hard to believe, isn't it? I mean, the Gettysburg Address is the most memorable epistle in American political history. In fact, it's not a political document. It's a different type of document altogether. And the reason that they did not want to invite Lincoln is they were fearful that he would use this opportunity in November of 1863 as the first round of his re-election attempt, for the election of 1964, and that he would politicize this movement. And we don't want this. This is not a political statement. This is a time of remembrance, of patriotism. And so in order to cover themselves, how about this? We have to invite him. We don't want to, but we have to. But if we delay the invitation to within just a few days or a week of the event, Lincoln will not be able to clear his calendar. And we've satisfied the invitation piece. He's turned us down because he cannot clear his calendar. So, it's a win-win. We've invited him, he doesn't show up. Perfect. Perfect, it's a win-win. But Lincoln had been looking for venues to talk about the meaning of the war to a live audience. And he had talked about the meaning of the war in proclamations to Congress and in interviews they'd given to editors. But Gettysburg would be special. And we know today, he didn't know, that this was one of the turning points of the war. And I want to go to Gettysburg, and I want to speak to the mothers and fathers, the brothers, the wives, the uncles. I want to speak to a crowd, and I want to tell them why their sons or their brothers or their husbands died. And he used that address. When he laid that address out, when he put it together, and Lincoln never sat down and wrote it. He put it together line by line as phrases occurred to him. So that working draft, that working draft was still a working draft the evening before the Gettysburg Address, and he was still working it through in his head. and on paper and sharing it, with William Seward, who accompanied him. William Seward was the Secretary of State. He did not, and I know this is in the canon, write it on the back of an envelope on a train. That did not happen. Lincoln would never have left something that important to just scribble some remarks on the back of an envelope. He thought it out, and the way it was designed, the way he designed it, birth, death, and rebirth. I mean, that was the theme. That's what held it together, birth, death, and rebirth. And we all know the birthing part, don't we? 77, 1776, right? 77, Lincoln. It's datable, when we were a nation. That we were a nation, not a union of states, a nation. 77. So there's your date, it's datable. Who, our fathers, where, on this continent, purpose, conceived, birthing, conceived in liberty. He used that word deliberately, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition, that all men are created equal. Now that was an indirect reference to the Emancipation Proclamation. And Lincoln did not come. Lincoln did not go to Gettysburg to scold the South. He certainly did not go there to claim victory, that the war was over. I mean, Gettysburg was a Union victory, but Lee's army was able to ghost itself, back into Virginia. He came to explain the meaning of the war. And in the body of that epistle, it's only 272 words. He finished it in 3 hours, and up to 3 minutes rather. The guy who spoke for 3 hours was Edward Everett of Massachusetts. And if one looks at the program for the day, the original, next to the phrase Gettysburg Address is the name Edward Everett. And next to Lincoln's name is the phrase remarks. Damn it, he showed up. And we just hope he doesn't politicize it, and it's remarks. And in the body of that epistle, he reminds his listeners that your son, your husband, your brother, your fiancé, he did not lose his life. And this is such a theme of Veterans Day and Memorial Day, that he did not lose his life. He gave his life that the nation might live. Those are exactly his words. He did not lose his life. He gave his life that the nation might live. Now that's an altogether different perspective, isn't it? And when we celebrate Memorial Day, and I know that Memorial Day is an all-purpose day in which we remember, those that are deceased, but initially Memorial Day was dedicated to those who died in the line of duty. Veterans Day was for all men and women who served. And today both of those days have been blurred, haven't they? Which is fine. Which is fine. It's just that at one time they were quite distinct. And then Lincoln, birth, death, and rebirth. And we all know that rebirth, that government of the people. And when Lincoln read that, and I was there, I have an active, I can time travel, just like that. I say that all the time. And when you hear the Gettysburg Address spoken, when you hear it, that most of those who read it incorrectly. They emphasize the preposition. Lincoln did not. I was there. He emphasized the noun, the collective noun people. The way you typically hear it read, it's read of the people. That's not the way Lincoln read it. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not. There's a commandment, isn't it? There's a commandment. There's the Decalogue. Shall not perish. Living organisms perish. He could have used a dozen other words, but he used the word perish. That we are a union. We're not a union. We are a nation of people. We are a nation of a purpose. We are a nation. We are the last best hope of mankind. We are an example. A city on a hill. He never said that. But the first national cemetery at Gettysburg. I'm coming back to the tomb of the unknown. We have a tomb of the unknown for World War I. We have a tomb of the unknown for World War II, known only to God. We have a tomb of the unknown for Korea. And at one time there was a tomb of the unknown for Vietnam. But because of a good deal of homework, the family of this downed fighter pilot, over North Vietnam, they were able to figure out carefully, we think, that was our son, who was shot down. And with a great deal of forensic work, they were able to determine that that man, the tomb of the unknown in Vietnam, indeed was our son. And he's buried now with the family in Missouri. There will not be a tomb of the unknown for Iraq or for Afghanistan because of identification procedures. It's almost perfect, isn't it? So we're not going to have any parades, that's for sure. I mean, there were no, but we're certainly, I don't believe, have a tomb of the unknown for either Iraq, or for Afghanistan. And just a word about that. I'm reminded of John Adams when he refused to go to war against France. And I'm quoting John Adams. I was there too. This is John Adams. John Adams, cranky John Adams. Great is the guilt of an unnecessary war. All right, that's John Adams. Pick your spots. And great is the guilt of an unnecessary war. John Adams. I give you John Adams. You go to that Vietnam Memorial. Boy, that's that's sobering, isn't it? Right, that slash of black, driven into the ground, and those 58 names, and we all know some of those people. I do. We all know some of those names, and I look for them, and I just say hello. I tell them hello. I'm here. I haven't forgotten. The dead don't remember us. We remember the dead, and that's the inversion of it. You see. Arlington came into being a year after Gettysburg. Arlington National Cemetery in May of 1864, and that simply came about for three reasons. One is that for the quartermaster of the Union Army at the time, his name was Meigs, General Meigs, M-E-I-G-S, that from a military point of view, from a strategic point of view, Arlington Heights, that if the Confederate get artillery up on Arlington Heights, they can shell the Capitol. So from a strategic point of view, from a tactical point of view, we don't want the Confederates to be able to get artillery up there. Remember, so much of the war between the states was fought between the two capitals, wasn't it? Richmond and Washington. They were only 125 miles apart or so. So a great deal of many of the battlefields in the Eastern Theater were determined by the location of Richmond and the location of Washington, D.C. So there's a tactical concern with Meigs. He also, as Quartermaster General, was in charge of burial details. The retrieval of bodies and to use those unloaded wagons, caissons, as an ambulance to bring back the dead and the wounded. And the cemeteries around Washington were bulging, with the dead. They were running out of room. So I need room to bury the dead. And there's Arlington Heights. And a third motive was very personal and very intense. That Meigs had been a classmate of Robert E. Lee at West Point. And Meigs was so unhappy, so disappointed and angry with Lee, that Lee had broken the vow, Lee had broken the pledge, duty, honor, country, to the flag, not the flag of the Confederacy. And that Lee had resigned from the Army. He had refused the offer of command to command Union armies because he could not, in the 3 a.m. of his soul, draw his sword against Virginia. So he resigned, and we know that over time became the commander, of the Army of Northern Virginia. And that land now, wheat and tobacco and a little bit of cotton, that land was now in the hands of the Lee family. And Lee broke the vow. So I'm going to seize that land, A, for strategic reasons, B, he broke the vow, C, I'm angry with him for that, that you broke the vow, that you no longer, you resigned from the Union Army, and also technically non-payment of taxes. You heard me right, non-payment of taxes. The Lee family owned $92.07 on that property. And the way the law was written, and this was written deliberately, that you need to appear in the Capitol to pay the taxes. You have to pay in person. And Mrs. Lee had sent an emissary with a check to pay the taxes. And the emissary was rebuffed. Mrs. Lee or General Lee have to show up in person to pay the taxes. Well, it speaks, res ipsa loquitur, it speaks for itself. Robert E. Lee is not going to go to Washington, D.C. to pay the taxes on Arlington. And he certainly is not going to have Mrs. Lee, go to the D.C. to pay the taxes. So the land is seized. And the first burials begin in 1864. And those burials, and this is Meg's, this is micromanaging. I want the first dead buried right in front of the Lee mansion. Right there, by the back door, if you will, by the front door, if you will. So that if for some reason the Lees ever get the land back, it'll be a cemetery of Union dead that you put there. So that's payback, isn't it? So you look at all of these items or these reasons that that went in the decision of Arlington, and now there was no Gettysburg Address. There's no Arlington Address as there was at Gettysburg. So and I've always been puzzled, why that did not happen. I don't know. I don't have a clever answer for you. Maybe Lincoln said it all. There's nothing more to say. I said it at Gettysburg, and I cannot improve those words. I cannot improve that message. The flag folding ceremony, and it was many years ago, the day after Thanksgiving, that I buried my dad, Lieutenant Leonard Hylander. And we buried him the day after Thanksgiving, and personally, that day is kind of a mix for me. He'd been sick for a while and gone. That's always personally a bit of a mix for me on that day, but that's okay. That's okay. It happens. It happens all the time. And that flag folding ceremony, and I know that there are some skeptics, and I roar them down on this, that the only reason we have 13 folds is that it enables one to carry the flag comfortably under your arm. It's more than that. I mean, those 13 folds, snap, 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 snap. I mean, each of those folds represent a certain spirit. Now, one of those folds, by the way, thanks to women of the country for providing, sons and daughters for the military. So each fold has a certain memory attached to it, a certain thank you attached to it. And it's 13, obviously, because there were 13 colonies, and we had 13 nations, 13 states who became a nation. And also when that flag is folded, the stars are up. And the stars are up, and this is done deliberately because the country saw itself, the leaders of the country saw itself, that we were a new constellation in the sky. We were a new of 13 stars, a new constellation. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Established by the people. Lincoln coming back to people. Established by the people, not for the benefit of king, clergy, or aristocracy. And that's why those 13 stars are face up. A new constellation in the heavens, to be gazed at, to be identified, and as a model, for other nations. And then when the flag is presented to the family member, on behalf of a grateful nation. And also, it's shaped in the size of a three-cornered hat, the Revolutionary hat. So you see, it's all tied together. 13, the flag folding, 1776, on behalf of a grateful nation, as opposed to union. And for me, on that day, at that morning, by the way, that's when they still fired the rifle. You know, you had a live firing, you know, which adds to the moment, and taps, which adds to the moment. And boy, that's a haunting tune, isn't it? You know, you hear that you know, that bugle, those sounds coming in from the hill, you know, maybe a few hundred yards away. It's very haunting. But my point is this, and I'll share this with Norton, that when the officer presented the flag to my mother, my stepmother, that she directed the officer to give me the flag as the oldest son, you know, from the first marriage. And I thought that was quite generous, don't you? Mm-hmm. Simply directed, again, my mother, Carolyn, my stepmother, Carolyn, to present the flag to me, you know, and I still have it. Of course I have it. You know, how would that ever, you know, get away from me? You know, and I see it every morning. I know just where it is. I left it this morning. And so I wanted to share that with you. You know, the flag. And Armistice Day became Veterans Day, didn't it? And it was Eisenhower, you know, who proclaimed it, you know, Veterans Day. And we also have Arizona. It was on the Eisenhower watch, you know, that the Arizona became a national cemetery, if you will, you know, for those who are unable to, you know, escape the sinking of the Arizona. So it's a day, and I'm glad it's in November because there's a certain feel in the air in November, isn't there? You know, a harvesting, you know, the end game, if you will. And I'm glad when that weather is the right kind of weather to celebrate Armistice Day, Veterans Day, and to celebrate the, you know, Thanksgiving. And Memorial Day was chosen for May. It was chosen for May for a very different reason, that the flowers are blooming. You know, so there will be fresh flowers that we can place at the gravesite. Well, now we can do it anytime, can't we? You know, but the notion of spring and the flowers and remembering and a sense of resurrection, you see, and a sense of life after death. Now, whatever your religious views are, I mean, it's immaterial at this point. The point is that's why the flowers are there. The spring and the belief, the certainty of those folks, you know, of an afterlife. You know, we've, as we've gotten older, some of us have become a bit more skeptical, haven't we? The word maybe is jaded as well. So all of those words work. So I wanted to share some of that with you. And I want to stop for a moment and maybe a question, maybe an observation. It's always good to go to Gettysburg. Gettysburg is not a working cemetery. I mean, there are, north of Gettysburg, I mean, there are burial plots for veterans, World War I, World War II, and so forth. But unlike Arlington, which is still a working cemetery, they have about 25, 26, 30 burials a day. And each one is very particular. And each one is so individualized, almost customized. This is an event, isn't it? And my brother, who's an officer, in fact, I called him the other day just to refresh this in my mind because I want to know what he wants. And he said, I want to be buried in Arlington. And I said, fine. You've told me that's all that matters. I'll take care of the rest. And he said, why are we talking like this? I said, because it's Veterans Day. And I had him, and I need to know, because I'll make it happen. I'm your older brother. He said, it's Arlington. And I said, you can have a full body burial. And he said, I know it. That's what I want. And I said, so do I. I don't want to be cremated. I do not want to be reduced to the contents of an ashtray. All right? Not me. That's how I view it. I mean, I know. That's just me looking at it. And I said, okay, you got it. You got it. You're going to get the case on because you're a retired brigadier general. You get everything. You get the horse with the boots reversed. He said, I know. I said, I know. I know, too. Right? And you're going to get it, man. You're going to get a big send-off when it comes. And then he said, can we talk about the Red Sox? And I said, you bet. I wanted to have this conversation with you, because it's in my head. It's right here. So I I interrupted myself, I know I did. Maybe a question and observation.
What if you go first?
Oh, they know. Oh, they all know. Oh, I'm going last. I've already got that worked out. I've cut a deal. All right? I'm a deal maker. Oh, they know. They know.
The old timers referred to Memorial Day as Decoration Day.
Yeah, it used to be Decoration
Was
Day.
that
Decoration.
a legal term, or I mean, was it?
Yes,
was
it was.
Always Memorial Day.
It was Decoration Day, and it became Memorial Day. I'm trying to remember when it became Memorial Day, but Decoration Day because you decorate, you know, the headstone. My grandmother used to recall, and I thought she was just hallucinating, but I checked it out. The dates work. The dates work. She's deceased as well. The dates work, but she could recall on Decoration Day, Memorial Day, the veterans from the Civil War. They were old men. I did the numbers. It works. She was a young girl, first and second grade, and these were old men coming to the school on Decoration Day. And the girls, it's hard to imagine Margaret being 6 years old. It's just, you know, it's hard to wrap your arms around that one. And that the girls the young girls would give the veterans flowers on Decoration Day, and to thank them for saving 7. But it's so, you know, when you step back and you inventory your life, you autopsy your life a little bit, you know, things begin to fit in, don't they? You know, an event there, you know, and all those disparate pieces, one can fit them together, and it becomes a lived life, doesn't it? In many ways. Something else, please? Yes, sir.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
Was it God, is it God, country, neighbor, self?
Is it what? I'm sorry, God?
God, country, neighbor, self, instead of duty, honor, courage?
It's duty, honor, country.
Duty, honor, country.
Yeah, duty, honor, country. That's the motto of West Point.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I thought Richard Gridley was...
It was duty, honor, country.
Oh, God, country, neighbor, self.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. My other one is, why did we side with the British during World War I? Why not? Why didn't we side with Germany? I mean, I understand
Mhm.
the Zimmerman telegram.
Well, you know that, huh? Good. How do you know that?
I read too much.
No, too much. You read enough. Go
But
ahead.
you have the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, all sorts of border disputes with
Sure.
Britain. Your two largest ethnic groups were Irish and German in
Absolutely.
the Civil War. Then maybe Grant opens the door to Britain, and we have immigration, a rise of immigration, but maybe some torpedoing of some ships. But
Yeah.
how do we get to side with with Britain
Yeah.
when you have a whole century of dispute with Britain?
Yeah. Can you stay till it's closing? What time do you close? All right. I'll be brief.
Roughly.
I'll be brief here.
Yeah.
All right, because that's a huge
It's,
question.
yeah, it's,
The question is, why do we
Don't-
side with England and not Great Britain? You know,
Germany.
with England and not Germany. Number of reasons. One, British propaganda, you know, was so influential, and the British were making the case that, and this is to Wilson, who was pro-British to begin with. Wilson always said, "I'd rather be Prime Minister of England than President," and he had a reason for that. The British propaganda made the case, thusly, that this war is not this is not a conventional war, that this is a clash of civilizations between the virtues of the Anglo-Saxon world, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and so forth, and against the Teutonic virtues, and not virtues, the Teutonic way of life of hierarchy, militarism, obedience. That this is a clash of civilizations. That's German. That's British propaganda, and the two notes you mentioned as well. The sinking of the Lusitania. The sinking of the Lusitania in May of 1915. And the best way to remember this, the sinking of the Lusitania, it is a public relations disaster for the Germans. They never recovered from that. And you're absolutely right, that the single largest ethnic group in the country was German and then Irish, and then everybody was in third place. And for German Americans, they kept their head down during World War I. Many changed their names, didn't they? And interesting things happened to the language on the streets when, after 1917, April of 1917, a century ago, you know, that sauerkraut became Liberty cabbage. German measles became Liberty measles, and so forth. Hamburgers, because it sounded like Hamburg, Germany, became Liberty burgers, and it goes on and on and on. The director of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, he was German. His name was Karl Mundt, M-U umlaut N-D-T, and he was canned because he's a German. So, I mean, these are all part of a very, very short answer to a long question. The German language was pulled from the curriculum. The works of Beethoven, Bach, and Brahms were discontinued. So it was just a clash of civilizations. And Woodrow Wilson was pro-British. And the reason he simply said, I rather would have been prime minister than president, is that as prime minister, he could go into the well and he could speak every day to members of the House of Commons, to support his policy, and he liked that. And Wilson was brought up between the Bible and the dictionary. And I always say that, and the dictionary piece was that, to write and to speak and to communicate effectively. He was a great wordsmith and also a great public speaker, to inspire. Join me, join us, doughboys, to make the world safe for democracy and the war to end all wars for your children and your children's children. And they went, for the most part. They did not flinch. So let's get that tape going.
Someone had a question over there while I'm getting it ready.
What happens?
Someone had a question over there while I'm getting it
Well, I
ready.
was just gonna say, if you haven't been to Gettysburg since they operated a little switch and a red light would light up, you gotta go back.
Yeah.
I have my granddaughters, it's spectacular now. You almost seem like you're in the battlefield.
You are.
It's amazing, the difference with the audio visual they got now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
spectacular.
And they've really done a great deal of work to limit and virtually curtail completely all encroachment on that battlefield. I mean, there was such encroachment after the war. And the best preserved battlefield in the East, with the least amount of encroachment, is Antietam. Antietam, and in the South, deep South, is the where is it? It's Shiloh. The Shiloh battlefield. But close at hand, 8-10 hours away, is the Antietam battlefield. A minimalist amount of encroachment. I get letters all the time looking for money, only because they know what I do, and they know that I'm connected up with some of this stuff. So there's always looking to help to buy that land or this land and that land, and take it away from the developers. Nothing wrong with that. So easy to overbuild, isn't it? You need careful building. I think the town of Norton I believe, is sensitive to that. Not overbuilding, because you need your elbow room, and once it's gone, it's gone. Right? Once that mall gets there, it's gone.
Arlington is perhaps the most famous burial ground in the United States, yet few people know much about it. From the outside, its uniform rows of stones seem impersonal, its size forbidding. For those who do visit, few venture beyond the Kennedy gravesite or the Tomb of the Unknowns. But the timeless story of Arlington is beyond its gates, in the places where reverence and perfection merge. Each day here, the small staff handles all the preparations that go into the roughly 25 funerals they will perform. They operate from their cars in an office that is 624 acres big. Typical services will be for veterans from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. But the most challenging funeral today will come last, for a soldier killed in Iraq. Those who serve here know that few of these grave sites will become famous, but they all believe that they should.
Each and every one of these stones represents a story. Someone had impact on our American history, and it's that cumulative, weaving of the fabric that makes Arlington so special. And that's why, as a cemetery, it's vital. We're growing, living. Every day, the history is added to the cemetery.
Gentlemen. Joe Mercer helps write that history.
Well, it'd be a lot easier if the chairs were on the other side, huh? Good morning, how are you today? Doing well.
His title is cemetery representative, but he is really a conductor of sorts, who spends his day trying to perform perfect services for the families who come here.
Which way? Did you want to bring the casket in from this side, or do you want to try and get over these stones?
I was thinking for the walk, the best way to come up is right over here.
Attention to detail is a very big part, because there are a lot of small details that if one of those details is left out or overlooked, it can be pretty embarrassing, and that's absolutely the last thing that we want. Tim, Section 8, grave 9092, if we could get some dirt to fill this grave. It's right behind my chairs, and it's pretty deep. The ultimate goal would be for a family to come in, have a nice, dignified service, and be able to think that their service was the only one that we had. That is ultimately the goal that we'd like to do, is that they feel as though everything for just a moment stopped for them.
In a normal day, he will oversee 5 funerals, and each will require a lot of Joe. But his last funeral today, for a soldier killed in Iraq, will require a little more.
It's definitely going to be the service that's going to take the most effort and attention for me today.
But that burial is 6 hours and 4 funerals away. In the guard quarters underneath the tomb of the unknowns, 4 Army privates are preparing for a remarkable test. James Gurley, Anthony Oliva, Keith Brown, and Christopher Harden are candidates for something called the Tomb Guard Badge, a kind of license to guard the unknowns. The first part of the test evaluates how well they prepare their uniforms. But calling it an inspection would be a dramatic understatement. That's because here, showing respect to the unknowns is in the details. To avoid a humbling failure, the new men rely on current tomb badge holders like Sergeant Ben Bell.
How many hours are you spending on your shoes?
Just for this alone, I probably spent about 8 hours, sir. So
I don't even want to mess with his hard work, I ain't gonna touch it. And he's not even gonna step into him until he's almost done moving around, because he doesn't want his shoe shine, his kiwi, to crack.
An 8-hour shoe shine definitely raises the bar. But burning off frayed threads with a lighter elevates uniform preparation to a realm somewhere between art form and obsession.
Guys, I don't advise doing that with your ties.
The stakes on the uniform are called gigs.
The gig on the uniform is basically any mistake, any measurement that's off, any piece of lint that's left on his uniform. This button's crooked, that's a gig. This keeper's off, a 64th of an inch, that's a gig. His medals aren't shiny, that's a gig. So we're just kind of double checking his hard work and making sure everything he has is ready to go.
The attention to detail is incredible, where, a 16th of an inch is too much to be off on the measurement. And the real reason for this occurring is that, these soldiers, when they step out those doors, represent 250 million Americans. And saying thank you to those who not only lost their lives but lost their identity. And I think we have the right to expect as close to perfection as possible.
Very solemn outside. It's very intense sometimes, just when I was out there, just look at the tomb, like, man, this is some amazing stuff. It's like, these individuals died for our country. That's one of the biggest reasons. Because again, when I'm down there, the platoon, it's one of those wow moments. Like, wow, this is amazing stuff.
So many people are interested. I mean, you watch them come off the tour mobile loud, kids goofing off, cutting up all the way up here. Watch the changing of the guard, and what happens when they leave? What are they? Totally different people, silent. You'll see old veterans that come here to observe the changing of the guard. When they leave, they're teary-eyed.
The new men may one day be worthy of that kind of respect, but they'll have to pass the uniform test first. While the two guards prepare for their test, soldiers of the Army's only caisson platoon are about to pull out for their first funeral of the day. Caisson burial is a hallmark of Arlington, a tradition that grew out of the Civil War. At the time, caissons were used to haul ammunition and artillery to the front. Empty caissons were quickly used to haul dead and injured to the rear.
Caisson, hold, hold.
Over time, it became the most respected way to carry a soldier who had died in battle. Today, it is an honor reserved for officers and recipients of the Medal of Honor. Soldiers who served in every American war are buried here, including reinterments from our earliest battles. But because space at Arlington is limited, in-ground burials are now restricted. Those who qualify include active duty deaths and recipients of the Purple Heart, the Silver Star, the Distinguished Service Cross, or the Congressional Medal of Honor. The cemetery has only been open for an hour, and already all the groups that make it work are in motion. As the cemetery representative is en route to begin a funeral, an honor guard is transferring remains to a caisson. And the burial team is just about to finish another. With backhoes and tampers, shovels and rakes, the burial team dispatched the honored dead with sobering speed. Arlington is busy and beautiful, but keeping it that way isn't easy. In the space of a day, crews will dig 8 new graves, remove a 145-year-old oak tree, and mow 130 acres of grass. We have power washed over 1,000 headstones and set 23 more. And they must do it all unobtrusively. For Eric Deal, who manages this, there is nothing mundane about these details.
If I get a call, and I do, that somebody comes out, and it might be the daughter of somebody buried here, and they go, my father's grave is sunken, and we came out over Father's Day, and it just didn't look like we wanted, and poor mom was upset. You cannot help but say, hey, if this was my father's grave, I'd expect it to look good too. And if you cannot put yourself in the shoes of the next of kin, then you probably shouldn't be working at Arlington Cemetery.
Few understand that better than burial team leader Darrell Stafford. For more than 20 years, he's put himself in the shoes of the families.
Yeah, I want to give him a little more security. Get a little more secure. You know, it's a little steep and didn't want nobody to actually tune over, so this may be a little bit, guess I'm the tester. But they ought to be coming, let me get out of the way. I see you guys.
Daryl's focus is on making it a little easier for those who are grieving. In their own martial way, the honor guards try to do the same. The uniformity, the cadence, and the ritual can have the effect of tempering grief with awe. Today, the Marine Corps is burying Colonel Joseph Zachary Taylor, and as an officer, he will receive full honors. For this funeral, Joe must take a crowd of roughly 50 mourners, over 100 Marines, the Marine Band, and a caisson, and move them about a mile across the cemetery to the graveside, with no hitches.
See, now one of the things that I'm looking at here is we have a car parked right by our grave site. So whenever we bring the case on, we're going to be stopping here. So I'm concerned that this car is going to be here. There's a gentleman down there visiting his wife's grave site. You know, unfortunately, sometimes we do have to ask them to move their cars, but you have to do it in a very, very gentle way.
One of the most arresting images in the procession comes last. It is the riderless horse, known as the caparison horse. The tradition reaches back to the Middle Ages. If a commander was killed in battle, his boots were removed and jammed into his stirrups, backwards, and the horse was sent racing for home. When it turned up at headquarters, the message was clear. They'd lost a commander. While the procession moves through the cemetery, down the graveside, the firing party is preparing.
It might get later and later. That gets going. Ready. Hey. Fuck. Hey. Hey. Fuck. Hey. Ready. Ready. Hey. Fuck. Hey. There we go. Money shot. Yeah. Keep that going. You know, there's hours, just hours of preparation that's put into a service that lasts 20 minutes. And it's important because you can never stop and say, well, let's back up and do that again. You got one chance to do it right, and that's it.
It is rigid, but in some ways, that rigidness is very comforting.
Okay, we're just going to step right up here.
You're burying someone that you love here, and your life is in topsy-turvy, it's been turned upside down. But yet you see the formalized honors being done. It's comforting, because there's still order out of your confusion. That rudderless moment, here's control. Here's something to focus your attention. Here's the rudder. And at that point, for perhaps just a few seconds, I think it is a consolable thing. Because now there's something to do. You know, that question of what do I do now, both meaning that exact second and maybe for the rest of your life, is answered very briefly.